is this stemming from myself and my desires, or is this stemming from a place of, fear of missing out and not feeling accepted and not feeling relevant?
I'm Heather Grish, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrish.com or on Instagram at heathergrish. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today, I'm here with Deanna Ansara, who's a designer and the founder of Vincetta Studio, a sustainable women's wear brand founded in 2013 with a focus on authentic transparency and inclusivity. The brand engages in urgent discussions surrounding mental health and body acceptance. Their minimalist design approach defies trend and time, encouraging people to find themselves, not following what fashion tells us we need to be. They connect with people and emphasize the importance of humanity through design by slowly releasing limited run and small batch capsules to encourage more thoughtful consumption. Everything is ethically produced in New York City with sizes ranging from extra small to 3XL and is available online in select boutiques. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dee.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
It's interesting, as I read your bio, I was like, wow, I really feel like what you're describing with the consumption of fashion really reminds me of people also needing more conscious relationships with food.
No, 100%. I think it's like an entire conversation. I think it's what we put in our bodies, what we put on our bodies, who we surround ourselves with. I think it's the entire conversation.
Totally. And actually, the way that we look at any sensory input, right? Whether it's the food that we're putting in our bodies or things that we're seeing, anything that comes in through any sense organ. And I'm really excited to talk with you. I don't really know a lot about the fashion industry. I've interviewed Nikki Trott, who I know you know as well, about her background in the fashion industry. And I don't personally know a lot about it, but I wear clothes. And I have a relation,
right?
yeah, and I have a relationship with clothes and how I want to feel in them and how I want my image to look like and all sorts of things like that. And you've been really vocal about wanting to change the fashion industry. Could you give us some background on what the big challenges are that you see?
So I would say as a whole, it kind of starts with us being in this like hyper capitalist state where there's like commerce wherever we turn our heads and we're constantly being sold to and constantly consuming information and product at a pace that's super unsustainable to not only the environment, but also to our minds and our bodies. So I think what I'm trying to encourage is just a collective slowing down. And within the fashion industry, there are over like 52 seasons in a year of product released. And frankly, it's just moving too quickly for the people creating the clothing and for the designers who are designing the clothing and also for the people consuming the clothing. So again, going back to that collective slowing down of production and consumption.
Did you say there were 52 seasons?
Yeah.
In a year? I guess so it's like each week is a season?
At least.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, like the amount of releases in a year is far more than needed. And it's just not sustainable, Heather.
Yeah, I mean, I think about how brands like Forever 21 and H&M and like super cheap brands have gotten really big. And I mean, I remember probably in my late 20s, like the level of consumption that I was doing back then. And like now I barely even buy clothes and I'm much more intentional about it. And I know you've worked for a couple different fashion brands before you started your own. One of them was J. Crew, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So you've had a lot of experience in the different, like working for a big fashion brand and kind of now doing this more smaller, personalized endeavor. And the fact that we're consuming clothing so much, what are some of the implications to, I guess, because one of the things that you really are passionate about is, I know, body acceptance, inclusion, mental health. These are themes that you've talked about a lot, and also within your brand. So, what are some of the ways that this consumerism, this like deep, I guess, sort of frequent consumerism, could be affecting our, I guess, perception of our bodies and also our mental health?
I think what ends up happening a lot with most marketing strategies and messaging is that we're not enough and we need this thing. We always need this thing, and it's coming from a place of scarcity, you know, instead of abundance. And, I even grapple within myself. I think it stems from a place of wanting to feel accepted and fit in and feel part of a much larger conversation. And we forget that actually we don't need to consume at the rate that we're consuming to fit in or feel connected with ourselves. And so I'm encouraging a much like deeper discussion. And I think it comes from a place of self acceptance and self exploration. I think it was really important for me to be size inclusive because the fashion industry very much pushes this one narrative of this is how your lifestyle should look. This is how your body should look, how your face should look. And it's, within the beauty and fashion industry, it's just perpetuated constantly. And I still see it today, even though it's gotten a little better, it's still very manufactured. And I think until we can get people to truly look at their own lives and be like, I have everything that I need here. I feel really good in who I am. I feel good with myself. I have all the tools that I need. And so when I go to purchase something, maybe I don't need it. Maybe I want it and I feel like it might enhance my life, but it's not going to make me any different than who I am right now. I think it starts with the self and it's like an internal discussion with yourself, and anything that you collect and purchase is just an enhancement of yourself versus like people feeling the need to buy and feeling the need to be a part of the conversation and feel accepted within society.
Yeah, that sort of reminds me of the conversation I've been having internally about whether or not I want to dye my hair because it's starting to go gray.
Mhm. Sure.
Do I want to dye it to cover it up because I don't like it, or do I want to dye it to enhance it?
Mhm. Absolutely. I think it's like these are all intentional decisions. And it's like, is this stemming from myself and my desires, or is this stemming from a place of fear of missing out and not feeling accepted and not feeling relevant? And I think that's a much larger conversation as we go into social media as well. And it's like just the rate at which we're cranking out content and consuming content is really harmful to the psyche. That's why you see a lot of people take hiatuses from Instagram and other social medias. And I think, honestly, Heather, this is why I'm very committed to getting to the root of the issues and discussing those. Because I think it's not just in the clothing we consume, it's everything we consume and do. And how can we disrupt that cycle to live a more conscious life, a more mindful life?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just this idea, I guess, of a vacation in general, vacation from social media, or whether it's a vacation from you want to do a cleanse, right, from food, or you want
Mm-hmm.
to go on a vacation, or you want to go on a retreat or something like that. And I do think that those moments are extremely powerful and necessary. But I think also we have to do the work to try to correct the relationships within us and resolve the relationships within us and our daily routines and things like that. So we don't have such a big craving for that to happen. I mean, it's like, not that
Mm-hmm.
traveling is bad, but there's just such a big desire for everybody to have these release valves everywhere, whether it's travel or taking a break from social media. So really looking at the relationships on an ongoing basis are super important. And I love thinking about this from a fashion perspective. And I'm curious, how'd you get into fashion? Were you kind of like a little girl that used to draw pictures of people wearing clothes?
So the way that I got into it is I had a pretty, I'm not going to lie, I had a very difficult childhood. There was a lot of trauma happening and I grew up in a very like hostile environment. I lost my mother at the age of 4. She took her life, and after that there were just kind of one thing after another. So I think a way that I was able to get through all of that was to create. It's something that I had available to me, and I just kind of created whatever was available around me. So that started with just sketching, and then it moved into painting, and then it moved into sculpting, and then it moved into draping, and it sort of, that conversation evolved within myself. I think it just came from this innate instinct to just create, because I think it creates kind of a safe haven, for anyone to create. And that just happened to evolve into fabric and clothing. And I think a lot of us find self exploration within getting dressed because we don't really have any other tools, I think, as we're growing up. So I went through a million different versions of myself in the way that I expressed myself externally, the way I dress, the way I did my hair, my makeup, all of that. But I then it kind of evolved into, I want to create clothing that can fit my body because I'm curvier and the industry standard is like a 10-inch difference from waist to hip. And I was like, well, that's got to change. And you see a lot more people now creating more size inclusive clothing, which is amazing to see. So that's kind of how that started. And I would say I've wanted to go into fashion since I was about, I don't know, 16 years old.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting career. It's very creative. And what you've done with it is you've also, it's not just about the clothes, right? It's the
No.
clothes, but it's about how we feel and perceive ourselves and perceive the world wearing our clothes. And when did you started your brand? I think it was 2013, right?
Yeah, that was founded in 2013. So I moved to New York City when I was about 21 years old, and I completed my education at FIT. And after that, I worked for places like J. Crew and Ralph Lauren. And so I'm coming from more of a corporate background and like mass production. But this idea of creating a brand is something that was always inside of me, creating community and creating conversation and making it more than just the clothing and bringing in that mental health aspect as well.
So you're very, very vocal about mental health, and you've actually tried to integrate this support for mental health into your brand. How does that work? What are the ways in which you've done that?
I'm going to be honest, it's not an easy conversation to have, right? Because I'm a paradox of sorts. I am encouraging people to slow down and consume less, yet I'm still selling product. So it's something that I personally grapple with. And honestly, I think it just comes down to humanizing myself, humanizing the brand, and humanizing the people who are part of the community, and just creating a conversation. I do see this brand evolving into more than just a fashion brand and moving into other spaces more permanently, such as mental health and teaching courses and holding community events and having the product just kind of be just one part of the conversation. And so that would be, I would say, the next iteration of what to expect within the brand. But for now, I'd just say it comes through in conversation and in messaging and by creating a narrative that allows people to discover their own sense of agency and putting thoughts out there that make people think and be introspective and constantly learn, because I think that's the most important piece is the education portion. And I hope to see more brands taking advantage of that part of their messaging as well, is in education.
If you want to create a more receptive body, free from toxins, inflammation, and metabolic issues, would it be crazy for you to explore booking an Ayurvedic consultation with me? There's probably never been a more perfect time to do it. Every day you wait matters when it comes to your health. So if you're ready to get your body back in balance, I'll give you a 30-day plan to get you started. Go to heathergrish.com to book a consultation. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. Yeah. And by the way, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I love how you've been supporting people through your work and this idea of slow fashion. I'm trying to compare it to a food because you said that you were a paradox, right? Like on one hand, I'm asking people to slow down, but on the other hand, it's sort of like food, right? We could eat processed potato chips or processed, whatever. We could eat that, or we could eat something that's a food that was grown with so much love and so much care in great soil and has been transported, a certain way and dealt with throughout the whole chain a very certain way. To me, I sort of view it as very similar. There's like this idea of slow fashion, just like a more high quality product that a person would be able to purchase. And so I guess other than this idea of slow fashion and, body acceptance, how do you think our relationship with fashion can be improved in other ways?
Hmm. I mean, I think there's definitely a parallel there, Heather, and that's why I really prefer to take like a holistic view to creating community and designing, to all of it, because it is a much larger conversation. It's not just about clothing. It is about what we consume, the information we consume, the food we're eating, the choices we're making. And that stems from a mindfulness. And I think there's like a lot of healing involved in that as well, to reach a place that is more mindful and more self-aware and more empathetic. And when we're looking at the clothing that we're buying, we're more curious as to what are the ingredients? What was the labor that went into this? What are their standards? How can I shop with my values? And I know this is something that is thrown around a lot, but it's true. I think when we can slow down and take notice of all of the little things in our day to day, I think we ask more questions and we're more curious and we're just taking closer look at how things are made, why they were made, and what is this going to add to my life outside of just another material thing, because I have enough of those already, right? I think we all do. So I think it's just changing the way that we view consumption, changing the way that we support businesses. And I think it's just a complete mindset shift and a heart shift as well. I hope that doesn't sound too cheesy.
No, it doesn't. And I feel like there's a reason that Marie Kondo got so big, right? It's sort of like,
Mm,
let's look at our relationship with the stuff that we have. We have stuff, and, she's challenging everybody to organize and clean out and things like that. And I don't know, I haven't actually read her book, but I've seen her on a couple of documentaries and shows. And it's like, why do you have this thing in your life? How does it make you feel? And are you just kind of like to keep it around because you don't want to let go of it, or whatever? Like, oh, maybe I'll wear that someday, but you just don't even really like it. And it's interesting because when we digest food, if you take that approach with your food, for example, like, oh, I'm not sure I really want to turn this into the cells and tissues of my body. I just, like, I don't really know if I want it. That's fine if you excrete it as a waste product and get rid of it. But if you get into this like limbo place with food, it doesn't turn out well. That's essentially how you get like endotoxins in your body. And it's the same thing with all the objects that we bring into our life. They do need this like super deep intention. One of the things we didn't talk about yet, Dee, is inclusion. And I know that it's a big word because it could go in a lot of different directions. But when you are working with inclusion within your brand, in what ways do you do that?
oh, I love that question, Heather. Yeah, it can be so many different things and interpreted in so many different ways. And this is a buzzword that's just being thrown around left and right. So I guess I'll break it down for you with my interpretation of it. And my approach is, first, it starts with the body, right? And over time, I have increased my sizes because as long as these bodies exist in the world, I think it's important that there are options available. And it's saying, I want you to be part of the conversation. I don't want anyone left out of the conversation. Outside of just body, though, we need to look at also, gender fluidity, how people identify. We need to look at age. We need to look at ethnicity and race. And is everyone being included in the conversation? Is everyone being represented in the conversation as well? And then beyond that, just to take it one step further and then tie in the mental health aspect, is neurodiversity. We don't talk about that nearly enough. And it's saying that as long as these different minds exist and they function in different ways, they should be accepted. It should be an accepted way to think and discuss. I mean, we can go down this whole of like talking about ableism and such, but like to me, I view diversity and inclusion as such a much larger conversation. And it's not coming from a place of like, let's capitalize on this and like, let's just make sure we're covered. It's more like genuinely, I believe that everyone needs to be part of the conversation to talk about, the intersections of things, talk about lived experiences and get like a 360 point of view. And it creates a much more interesting narrative and conversation.
That seems like it's a lot to hold space for too with a brand, because just thinking practically about all the different sizing that you have, that's a lot of different variables that you have to account for when
Absolutely.
you're building your business model, right? Don't you feel like most brands just kind of like now you have these brands that are like specifically plus size, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm doing a lot more than your average brand in terms of like the social aspect and like wanting to create change from a social and an environmental space, not just like creating product and doing inclusion because I know that I can capitalize on this now. And for me, since the beginning, it was about making sure that people feel seen and heard and creating spaces for them to feel seen and heard and creating tools for people to feel like they can express themselves and really find themselves too. So you'll notice the reason why I stick with minimalism is because it stands the test of time. And for me, it encourages you almost to be more creative with how you get dressed and how you put together something. And it's something that transcends time, age, everything. So it is a much larger conversation and it is a lot to hold all at once. But I think for me, one thing that we do all have in common is that we're human beings. And so I try not to keep people in boxes and limit that. And that's why I also have a difficult time with social media as well, because it kind of does put us in the boxes. But these are the kinds of conversations I like having. And this is why it's important for me to approach inclusion the way that I am.
Yeah, these are really big conversations. And I think it's amazing that you've been trying to really include so many people in your brand. And I guess in general, for all people, is there something that you think everybody could sort of contemplate to improve their relationship with fashion, no matter what body type you have, no matter what your skin looks like, no matter what gender you are, no matter how your sense organs are functioning or your brain or anything like that?
Yeah.
What's be like one way to improve your relationship with fashion?
I think finding other ways to define yourself outside of the way you look and the way you dress. I think grounding yourself and being present, practicing mindfulness, like doing meditation and slowing down. I know I keep hammering that in, but like it's really important and it's a practice. It's a constant practice. So I think, yeah, just redefining the way that you define yourself. It's not about the material things. Those are just add-ons. That's just like the cherry on top. That's not the material things that we own do not define us. They are just an extension of us. So I think that's something I would really encourage people to really think about.
That's really beautiful. So, you also have a club on Clubhouse called The New Normal, and that's where we met. And you've been holding space pretty intensely for a lot of people. But tell us about that club and how it ties in with your brand.
The new normal is, yeah, something I created a few months back, and Clubhouse has been an amazing space to sort of like test drive these conversations and hold space in ways that other social media platforms just simply can't. And we talk a lot about mindfulness and emotional intelligence and accountability and how we can lead with empathy, how to become stronger leaders, how to express ourselves. So it's like those are the kinds of conversations I'd like to have more of. And also like normalizing mental health in ways that we could talk about it without making it feel so heavy all the time, so intense all the time. So I think it's just the new normal to me is creating new standards and raising the bar for how we treat ourselves and how we treat those around us and how we can deepen the connection with ourselves and the world around us. So I really loved having that club and I have taken like maybe a little week long break from Clubhouse, but it's been just so amazing to build out that community and we're at over 3,000 members now, which is amazing. I'm excited to watch it grow.
Well, it's such an important theme, right? This idea of having a new normal, because everybody's lives were just extremely disrupted and still are. And so, part of this work now is like, okay, what's life going to be like going forward? And how is it now? What are some of the ideas that you had in starting the club about, what people might be going through right now in this time in history? And whether that's just sort of like mental health or lifestyle, or even if it related to your fashion brand.
I think for me, these conversations have just been waiting. I've been wanting to have them for so long, and this gave me finally an opportunity to have them. But with the club in particular, and this moment in history and time, I think a lot of people have kind of dissected and taken a step back at how am I doing things and how can I move forward? How do I want to move forward? Do I want to just stay the same or do I want to evolve? And I'm going to lean more on the optimistic side for now and say that I think people want more and people want to go a little deeper and people want to become more empathetic and more understanding and more connected with the earth and the environment. I hope this is the direction that we're headed in because it's very much needed. We don't have any more time to wait on this. So I think it's like, honestly, Heather, I think people just want to feel seen and heard. And I think I give them the space to do that and to go a little deeper and to feel safe while exploring these kinds of conversations around mental health and the environment and, emotional intelligence and accountability and empathy. And yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's really about trust, right? So we're going to speak with people who we trust. And it's a big part of healing for anybody, whether, whatever you're trying to heal from. And, it sounds like you've been through a lot in your life. And, many people have been through incredible things in their lives. And it's those who've been through these really challenging things in life who I think are the ones that do an exceptional job holding space for others, because there's a lot of understanding of what people go through in these moments. Yeah. So, okay, last question, Dee. What does the wisdom of the body mean to you?
Oh, wow. Well, I think to me, the body holds so much information for us. And I think it's honoring it, honoring our bodies, and, really listening. When we slow down, we can really listen to our bodies and honor what it's telling us to do. And I think even further, connecting your wisdom of the body with your wisdom of the mind, and you can make that mind body connection. I think that's when things really start, I don't know, coming together, Heather.
That's really well put, because I think a lot of people don't even realize that those are two separate wisdoms.
Mm-hmm. They sure are. And I love what you're doing. I think there's so much wisdom within our bodies. And I think a lot of the times we think about wisdom coming from, the heart or the mind, but I think there's so much information within our bodies and there's such a disconnect to the mind. So I think, yeah, what you're doing is really special.
Yeah. And it's like when a person feels safe, then it's always easier to connect back with the body, right?
Absolutely. I mean, hands down. And so it's like, how do you create that safety for yourself and also feel safe when you're around other people too? And gosh, we could have this conversation all day long.
Well, thank you so much, Dee. It's been so wonderful having you on the wisdom of the body, and we'll do it again sometime.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you so much, Heather. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.